Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we have a tier list for the first set, the first meta for the One Piece card game. It is Romance Dawn, and I'm so excited for it. It's coming out this week. I've been waiting for a very long time for these cards to be out and for me to like physically hold them in my hands and play with them. So really excited, and so we're doing this updated tier list to kind of celebrate that. And I made a tier list a couple months ago, just kind of going over the archetypes in general based on the Japanese meta and kind of just my own playing with it back then, but to just signify the start of the North American meta, I wanted to do an update video on it and kind of go from there. So we're just going to go from the bottom to the top, and based on the tier titles, we're going to put King right here. It is just it's a really stinky leader. I don't really know why they made him like this. He doesn't really do anything. Every other purple leader is just clearly better than him, and it just sucks that purple has like one less color. Though purple does have more cards, at least once we get the extra deck. That I don't know how we're getting that, so I'm not putting that into a lot of the ideas or like the placing for some of these leaders. So, but King's just the worst. It just really stinks, and that's just kind of how I'm feeling there. So. There we go there. Talking about also the star decks, we're just going to talk about Uta and Shanks as well. Both of them are just kind of in this low. I don't think they're very, very good for what they're at, honestly. The card pools and cards that they're adding are good, but Uta is just clearly like worse off than most other. Like the effect that she gives isn't really cost efficient for it. If it was like a Dawn times 1 that you give something like plus 2,000 when you attack would be good, but the fact that you have to spend 1 Dawn to give something 2 or plus 2k and it's only vanillas is just kind of rough for it. But sometimes it's fine, but like just a lot of these other kind of boost effects kind of outpace it, and they don't have to be restricted to cards without effects. So I think that's kind of important there. Shanks kind of the same thing. I think Shanks is like a little bit better, being able to like attack and then give stuff. Especially like Dawn -3 doesn't really mean anything when you've dawned out at the end of the game. So I think that's impactful for it. It's definitely better than King's effect, honestly, and it's just fine. And it's more of the cards that we get from the Shanks starter, but I think he is kind of good there. Other leaders that are kind of in this highly playable, if you want to call it tier 3, whatever you want here. I'm probably going to put the both of the crocodiles here. It's a real shame. I think this one's just better, but like Crocodile just like doesn't do anything after the starter deck meta, and I think he's a really, really cool leader for what he does, and I like what he does, but it just doesn't belong. It doesn't have the same kind of impact it does with the new stuff, especially since red and green are just so strong, and a lot of these cards are totally okay with cards getting bounced back to your hand, unlike the starter deck meta, just because they're playing more of these kind of aggressive mid-range decks, where a lot of these have on plays or bouncing it back just means you have something to play again next turn, and that's kind of just a real shame for it. So that's kind of it is. And then the blue purple crocodile, one day this might be good. I've been really, really trying for it. It's just very janky, but it's a very, very cool deck, and I'll probably continue to try playing it every time we get more event cards. But right now it's not in a really, really good spot. So there we go there. Any other decks that kind of belong in this highly playable? Probably the red green Luffy is probably the top end of it, and we'll rearrange it like this for now. But yeah, Luffy is good. Like but the thing about right now is that red and green have very, very, very good leaders as it is. So the fact that he is just like the worst red green leader means that it's actually pretty good. But the restand effect you kind of already have from Eustace Kid, and like if you're red and green for 4 life, I think Trafalgar Law spoilers is going to be just better by and large for it. So I think he's cool. The restand as effect is great, but it's dependent on having the cards out, and it's just better on Kid because you're able to get, this card is not very costly, and on a leader swing is way better. So maybe I'll try it out. Obviously, he's like the demo deck, so I do have experience with playing him. And they're always going to be Straw Hat cards, so it could be like some Straw Hat card gets them a really good when attacking effect that's not once per turn that could be abused with this leader. But until then, it's just okay. But it could probably even be put into competitive, but I think everyone's going to be playing the other red-green stuff before it. So there we go there. Moving up into the competitive tier, though, I'm going to put Odin right here. He's actually really neat. I like what he does, and I think this is also just kind of a thing where there's not enough cards in his archetype that use his trait as much to signify switching to this. There's just in the other green archetypes, they just have better and more of these cards that fit the traits and everything. But being able to discard a card to refresh to Dawn is fantastic, and I can see that being very impactful later on. It just means like discarding a card to give something plus 2k power is usually worth it, because that's just like using a a super, like a plus 2k counter on offense, essentially, if you want to think of it that way. But also being able to give stuff more Dawn, which means that you're able to use your Dawn effects. I think he's really on the edge of being able to be good. He just needs a little bit more of cards for his archetype or for just the general playstyle to make it worth it. But a lot of the cards he has are good, and they are good in like other green-red decks. So I'm going to just put him there in competitive. Next up we have Kaido, the blue-purple one. I think is really cool, and I think it's almost there. And the only thing, I've said this several times, the roughest thing about playing a multicolor leader is that you're always kind of wanting to be more of a control deck, especially with the the crocodile and the Kaido. Both of them of the multicolors are these kind of more control-centric decks, which are cool. However, if you want to be a control deck, it sucks that you have to be at 4 life, right? So the colors kind of tell you to play something more controlling, but your life mechanic says you probably need to be playing something more offensive because or aggressive, just because you don't have as much life as your opponent is going to have more times than not. So it's in a weird spot, but I do like the effect. The fact that you do get some extra ramp on the leader is really cool. And honestly, like, the regular purple Kaido, like the -7 almost never comes up. Maybe comes up like once per game. And part of the reason he's good is just because of his name and his traits and being able to do that. So this Kaido does the same thing. The only thing that's worse about it is that you start at 4 life, honestly, and that can be kind of rough. But obviously a bigger card pool and having a more impactful, or at least an effect that you're able to do more often, I think is very good. Also, in general, too, purple is going to get a bigger boost when we get the Shankstar deck. I don't know the specific release date for that, but that does have a lot of just good purple cards that does just standardly help both Kaido leaders as well. So that's something to consider there. Next up, we have Don Quixote do Flamingo. He's cool. He's very, very cool. I like what he does, and he's, I think, the most viable blue deck that we have right now. However, that's a really low bar as it is, and unfortunately, he doesn't get a lot of. I think he just struggles to keep up pace. Like, the big thing about this deck is that you're able to use it to generate pseudo card draws by using the effect to play a card from your deck, from the top of your deck specifically. It means that you're playing a card that isn't being played from your hand, which means you're technically drawing one card, right? So the idea is that you can long term, if you're able to get this effect off and proc it consistently, you're able to get some inherent card draw, which is very, very hard in this game, right? But the fact that it comes out in suspended, the fact that you're not really offensively doing anything, and it's something where your opponent can just keep attacking into your guy and then go into your other guys with it. It's very easy to get rid of these guys and just lose advantage for it. So I'm going to probably tinker with this more once the actual cards come out. I've kind of fallen out of favor for it. It does do some neat stuff, but you'll just see like it doesn't really do anything a lot of the time, and then your opponent's just able to just hit your face or just go off and just out-tempo you to a point where it doesn't matter if you have more card advantage. So that's my experience with it. I think there is something there, but I don't think it's as popular as these other decks. And then these last 5, I'm going to put Zoro at the top of competitive. I think he's, if I was to rearrange it, probably something like this. I think Zoro is in a good spot, and I honestly think he's one of the stronger ones. And I would almost put him highly competitive, but I'm not going to, just to even it out. But I don't think there's much difference between him and Luffy, honestly. Both of them kind of do the same thing, where you're able to use your Dawn to gain more effects. Zoro just saying, I'll put a Dawn under myself, which I'm probably going to be doing anyways, and then everything on my board gets plus 1k, which means that all of your 4ks can potentially start hitting for damage for free, and just all the other stuff that kind of goes with it. So I think he's very strong for what he does, and I think he's just maybe a little inconsistent sometimes, and not as flexible as Luffy. But if you're able to hit your curve and hit everything, he's very strong, and I don't want to dissuade anyone. And honestly, this video is not to dissuade anyone from playing any decks or leaders, but this is just my insight after playing the game. So I think Zoro is great, and I think he's topped some events. Maybe not, again, as consistent as Luffy, but I think he is very, very strong and worth kind of going into if you want to focus on. I know he's a crowd favorite too, so don't. I think Zoro is someone you can really commit to and play well. So next into this top four, I honestly, this is on the fly because I knew these were going to be the top four, and I'm trying to think during this discussion who I think is the best one. I think Eustace Kid is not the best one, but I think he's very, very solid for what he is. He's very strong and consistent at doing everything. Being able to, like, the effect on the leader is just bonkers. It's under cost, in my opinion. Discarding cards means nothing, especially since you're probably going to have at least 1 or 2 dead cards in hand at any given time, so it's very easy just to pitch them. And being able to swing twice in this game just means, like, you have an end game win condition, but you also have ways for, like, board removal. It's very, very flexible for what you're doing, and it means that you can play this game. Eustace Kid, you can play it either aggressively, you can play it a mid-range, or you can play it controlly, just because of how the leader works in that way. And just how green works. Green's really good at disrupting the board, being able to suspend stuff or get a lot of cheeky board advantage, and as well as the big 8-drop Eustace Kid from the set is incredibly powerful and does a lot of stuff. So I think he's great. I think he does a lot of things, and he's very, very strong. Next up, I think Kaido, and this is before we get the purple stuff. So even if he gets the new purple stuff from the Shanks deck, he's very strong. And the only thing with Kaido is that he's sometimes a little inconsistent. You really, really need to see Onigashima Island every turn 2 that you have, and if you don't, your win rate plummets from it, unfortunately. So it's a little unfortunate from that way, and it really depends also. Like, he's someone who's just better in best 2 to 3 because chances are out of 3 games you're going to see Onigashima Island 2 of them. But seeing every game in a best of 1 really stinks for that kind of stuff. But Kaido's probably the best control deck that we have because it's a purple leader that has 5, that has the relevant traits, and has an okay ability, right? Like, that's really it, right? Like, there doesn't really need to be that much of a different leader for purple to get, like, someone better than him. He's just kind of like the de facto the one we have right now. So I don't think that he's going to be, like, maybe long term the best leader for purple. He just literally is the best one we have right now that works with kind of everything that we want and everything that we're doing. So he's strong, though. We've obviously been seeing him in the deck limited battles and just doing super duper well. So I'm gonna put probably Luffy here at the top, next to top spot. Which who could be the best one in my mind? But I think Luffy is very, very strong for what he is, and it's very like a 180 from where we're at in the deck limited battles, where he was just the worst one. Clearly, we saw it based on top 16 performance. We saw it based on how many people actually decided to bring him as well, and it's just the fact that, like, his deck was just bad. His deck wasn't doing anything, and it wasn't really even taking advantage of what the leader did and everything else. But man, Red got a bunch of good cards in set 1, and Luffy is probably the best leader, at least in the mono red capacity, to take advantage of them. There's just a lot more of these rush cards, these ways to gain advantage, these ways to disrupt your opponent, and it's just fantastic. Also, just more cards that just have counter plus 1000 on them, which the starter deck itself was severely lacking. So I think this is great. I think Luffy's going to be very good. I know a lot of people probably disappointed with how the starter deck fared, but in the actual first meta that we have, he's fantastic and worth playing and doing stuff with that. So, and then lastly, we have Trafalgar Law. I'm going to put him at the top here, and mostly just because he is great right now, and we're going to see if this continues. But I think of any of these decks, he just can go off and, like, get you into a spot where you feel like it's impossible to come back up, because he gets so much of his cycle. And the big thing about Trafalgar Law too was that when I first saw him, I thought that what he was doing was very, very tricky to do. Being able to have 5 cards, especially with his little card draw that we have, but the fact that there's just minimal forms of removal early game, and that a lot of these 1-drops and 2-drops are actually quite good. Like, blockers are really good. A lot of the you know, a lot of them have good on plays that you can recycle, and then obviously the Trafalgar Law in the set is just fantastic for him, being able to continue your bouncing and just everything else. He's very strong, and especially for like he weirdly turns into like a control leader if you really want him to be, because you can put a lot of blockers in your deck and you can just make it so your opponent's having a hard time going in, and you get your card advantage later in the game by doing your effects. So he's very strong, and it's just the fact that I think that red and green probably have the best cards in the game right now by and large, and because of that he's the best leader to take advantage of it. So that's also why the red green Luffy, I think if you really want to play him, I think you'd actually do good with him, and the only fact that you wouldn't is because Trafalgar Law more or less does everything you want to do but better, and that's kind of how it is. So anyways, this is my tier list for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoy the release of Romance Dawn. Let me know what you guys are excited to play, and I'll see you all next time.